Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you for your time this evening and thank you for joining us. My name is Brad McElwain. I am part of the Office of Family Engagement, and my office that I work with is a proud sponsor or a part of the group that's bringing you the Zoom meetings, the OPCD Zoom meetings that you're able to take part in this evening. The program, this is our fifth in a series for this fall that we brought to all the different classes for everyone. And the idea is to be able to give you, families, parents, some insight into what what the Office of Family Engagement can provide and some perspective on the best thing to do for your students as far as advice, internships, and employment strategy and those things going forward. I think you're going to find the next hour incredibly informative, and I think it's a great peek into just exactly the kind of services and the opportunities that are available through the Career Service or Office of Personal Career Development. I want to start us off tonight with an introduction to Andy Chan. Many of you may know that Andy came to Wake Forest about 12 years ago with a vision of just exactly what he would like to be able to see a career service office be like. It's that vision that's brought us to the Office of Personal Career Development, and it's a national leader across the country in this type of service. Andy's vision is what's kind of brought forth this kind of hands-on program that gives your student a chance to be able to learn more about what they want to do to find passions at work. Before I turn it over to Andy, though, a couple quick housekeeping notes. You can go to your Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen and submit a question. No question is too small. We will try to answer those questions directly with you online, or we'll do it directly across the conversation to everybody. If you'd like to address it to a specific panelist or something, please list that in your submission, and we'll take it from there. But I wanted to, at this time, turn things over to Andy, and I'll talk to you again here toward the end of the program. Andy?
Thanks a lot, Brad, and welcome to all the parents out there. We're really glad your students are at Wake Forest, and it has been a great year so far. Lots of activities, not only in the recruiting end of this scene, but just overall around campus. I think the students are having a great time. Anyways, we're here tonight to talk a bit about what we might think ahead with respect to our first year student, internships, summer experiences, getting career ready. What does it take, and how do we help the students navigate that process so that they can have a very successful 4-year experience and build a foundation for a really solid professional and holistic sort of career life long after Wake Forest. The other thing is that we'll really focus on the first year experience. We won't talk that much about the upper level classes or on like their first full-time job market. So we'll definitely focus on more of the internship and summer type experiences. And so with that, I have a few different people who we'll bring on. I'll introduce them as we go. But the first person who is on our team is Stuart Meese. Stuart Meese is our Executive Director for Employer Relations at Wake Forest. He's been with us for several years. And he really and his team work on building relationships with employers to help them understand how to best recruit our students, how to make sure they have a great experience. And also at the same time, Stuart has a lot of information about the market that we pass back to employers to help employers just in general know how to hire college students, period, not only at Wake Forest, but anywhere. So Stuart, welcome. It's good to see you. And before I get started, maybe you want to say hi to everyone.
I hope everyone's doing well. Thanks for your time this evening as you're listening to the 9-1 Wake Forest Demon Deacons in football, getting ready to close on a trip to Charlotte for the ACC Championship.
We're very excited about our sports teams. Football and many of our fall sports are really successful. We carry that success hopefully into the job search process, which actually is a good transition. So Stuart, this is proving to be a very unique year, more jobs and internships than ever. I've been in this business for over 20 years, and this is like the hottest job markets ever. Can you share a little bit about stats? How hot is the market, and why do you think it's happening?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt this is the best time if you're looking for an opportunity coming right out of school. There's a lot of reasons why, the pent-up demand that we've had before, the effects of people exiting the workforce, the great resignation, et cetera. But that trickles down to college recruiting as well. And so we track this year over year. So last year was up pretty significantly as we were kind of coming out of COVID. But this year, the total number of opportunities are up 75%. 75%. for internships. It's
Wow.
118% for jobs. Okay, this is more than it was last year. So that's the supply or demand, if you would, or whichever way you want to look at it, for the employers. But then if you look at total applications for these internships, it's up 14%. All right, it's just there's still a big gap there. So currently, I just looked in Handshake. That's a system that connects employers and students. There are over 7,000 active internships right now, 7,000. And so I will sort them by what we call the Wake Employer Network. These are organizations that have hired our students. We have a relationship with them. They're a managed account. There's about 1,500 of those. And over 1,000 of them have zero applications because there's just not students aren't applying enough, or either they're not the right job, or there's so many of them out there. So for freshmen, typically they are kind of lowest in the pecking order. Typically employers are looking for juniors to try and convert them to full-time. If they don't have that, they go to sophomores and then freshmen. And so some of the opportunities will say if they're interested in freshmen or not, but just by the simple fact that companies haven't gotten all of the applicants that they need, I would go ahead and apply as a freshman, especially if you have some type of skill set or interest in that particular field. You may be surprised to see what you can actually find because of the shortage.
Thanks, Stuart, for that perspective on the numbers. And yeah, even though it's an increase, a huge increase from last year was actually even increased over the year
Yes.
before. So if people remember before COVID, in 2019, we thought that was a really strong year. Then COVID occurs and we all go into lockdown in March of 2020, and it was still a strong year nonetheless. And this year's even stronger than that. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's, one of the things that has kind of changed post-COVID in the way that employers are recruiting college students now is that if you think back into 2020, almost everybody was virtual. 21, they were kind of coming out. So now that in 2022, it's interesting now because we're beginning to hear rumblings from folks that are now seniors that may have accepted a full-time job from their internship, that some of the employers, because they haven't been able to find other talent, actually want these students to work part-time while they're still finishing their degree and offering some additional incentives. So now that they have a couple of years of experience of working with remote workers in the form of interns, now they're seeing this as a viable gap or a viable opportunity to close the gap that you're seeing right now. So I think students are going to be more in demand for some of these shorter term opportunities or remote opportunities. And there's a number of vendors that are out there that are trying to take advantage of this as well. One company comes to mind, Parker Dewey, that are offering kind of short-term internship opportunities, 5-10 hours or project-based that's out there. So there's plenty of ways for students to get experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be what we think of as a formal internship. It could be a study abroad. It could be a long-term service project. It could be undergraduate research. It could be getting some type of certification like in Excel. All of these things can help the individual become more marketable when their time does come to enter the full-time labor market.
That's a great point, Stuart. One of the things I think that is also very interesting right now is that employers, I thought you might also talk a little bit about how employers used to go to core schools and maybe
Yes.
only go to like 20 schools. Now they are going everywhere. How are they doing that? And then also to forcing our students to have to do in terms of thinking about how to be effectively prepared to do like the interview process and all that stuff, because they're obviously not all doing it in person right now. How's that working out? And why do you think our students are able to handle that pretty well?
Yeah, so a couple of things there, what Andy, you're saying. So some of the larger companies that have more established employment brands, they found during the 2021 season a pretty interesting fact that they could rely on that brand and be almost as productive that way than actually coming to campus and spending time and resources. Now, that's not necessarily the case for small to medium-sized companies that have somewhat struggled because of this. So as a result, a company has found that if they cast their net wide, and there's like Handshake that are making this a lot easier, they can cast a wide net in terms of a posting and get a lot more applications, kind of this long tail type of mentality by going to every school as opposed to a select group. And so the companies find this to be quite efficient and effective in the short term with this. So that requires students to engage more in how they actually recruit. So if they're not necessarily coming to campus, a lot of them will have virtual info sessions. But instead of it being just for Wake Forest students, it may now be with someone from Northwestern or USC or Cal Berkeley or NYU or Florida State. It could be all over the country. And so this whole idea of presenting in the box, this was from one of our employers that they talked about, of how are you going to present yourself in this box like I am right now? What's your background? How do you engage? What's your eye contact, your hand gestures, showing that you're engaged in the process and how you can stand out in the same way that you would if you were in an in-person on-campus event at a job fair. So there's some subtle differences there with that, but things that we need to alert the students on in that particular sense, how to follow up, how to approach chat, how to be prepared for the conversations, things of that particular nature. So those are some of the subtle changes that we have to work ourselves through during this ever evolving process, which is college recruiting. In terms of the schedule, that's another aspect of it. So typically you will see most recruiting done, especially with the bigger companies, in the fall semester, because of the idea that early bird gets the worm. They want the best that are out there. Employers are always going to focus more on full-time first than interns. And so a lot of times the intern programs kind of get pushed in the spring semester. However, those companies that do it best, they want to get those students in the fall because they don't want any competition for them to, they want to get to them before the competition occurs. So then you have this interesting point. Now, if companies aren't getting as many as they hope, just like I said to you, 1,000 of these 1,500 Wake Employer Network internships are getting 0 applications right now. And we don't know this right now. Are they going to be satisfied with what they've gotten this particular fall? And will they come back in the spring? Will that timeline expand a lot more? Before it was much shorter in time, but now because they're not getting what they want, we believe that employers may be coming back in the spring, especially for just-in-time hiring on the full-time jobs in the spring. So if you didn't get something in the fall, it's not the end of the world. We believe that there could be some more opportunities and will be more opportunities, unless the inflation gets out of control and the global energy crisis kind of takes over. That may be a different story. But as for now, there's more than enough opportunities right now from what we're seeing. It gets down to how engaged does the student want to be in terms of pursuing them.
So one of the things I want to emphasize is, so one is that there are a lot more opportunities than there are students. So even if you're a first-year student, the chance of being able to get some kind of summer internship is possible. I think a second thing is that most internships will pay more than not, although there are some that are not paying, and that's actually illegal, but that's what they're doing. And that's not our job to police that, but that's just the reality. But it's not all internships are like unpaid. So I think it's important for you to know that. And actually that's disclosed on the postings too. Another one is that this virtual recruiting process, virtual interviewing, we have on our website, a virtual recruiting guide for students to be able to read and learn about how to do it. What are the key things they need to know? And so that's important to know. There's a lot of information on our website that's really helpful to help students through the process. And then the last thing is that you could apply to work at a place that's not in your place of residence. Like you could decide to live at home. Let's say you live in Atlanta and apply to a job that's in Seattle and get a job working virtually, because so many companies are working virtually that they understand that the students could have that flexibility. So that's another thing that a lot of times first-year students don't want to leave home, or their parents don't want them to leave home. But now you can actually do that and be working in time zone 1 or 2, 3 or 4 time zones different from where you live, and be able to actually have an interesting work experience, even though it is virtual. So think those are all interesting things that are a bit different than what we've seen before, right?
That's true. And like I said, it's always evolving. So if you have this mindset that's a year or two old that says, oh, I'm a freshman, there's nothing for me, et cetera, that's very highly competitive and so forth. That's why we stay on top of some of these market trends, talk to employers, look at the data and so forth, and try and share that. So as a follow-up, and we've been doing this for all of our calls here with parents, I'm going to send an Excel file. I just downloaded the 1,500 opportunities, as I was mentioning. It's got some other information. So all the student has to do is just type in the job ID into Handshake, and they can see each one of these opportunities, and then they can formally go in and apply. So I'm going to
Great.
send that to you, Brad, and then Brad will send it out to everybody on the call, and you can look at it yourself, send it to your student, and I think that would be quite helpful for you. And there was a related question to this in terms of a list of all the companies that recruit on campus by academic area and degree type. That will get a lot to what you're looking for. If you have a specific question, you can send me an email and I can give you some historical data as to who the top employers are by major industry field or geographical region. In my email, I'll type it in, but it's mises@wfu.edu.
Great. Thanks, Stuart. Let me ask you another type of question. We actually really try to tap into a lot of networks to be able to get recruiters recruiting, in particular our alumni network.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how your team goes out and does that, but also sources oftentimes jobs that maybe they're not things that are readily posted on Handshake, but we actually find new opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's we put together this list. There's about 40 different ways that we source or find opportunities for students that that kind of align with this concept what I've told you, the Wake Employer Network. But then there's other things that we do that we find throughout the year on an ongoing basis. There could be economic development announcements or things we read in the paper or any type of LinkedIn news trackers that we have. We all have Sales Navigator accounts, which allows us to get a lot of this information at our fingertips. And then we post that onto Handshake. So we augment the process of what we're already doing with that. And oftentimes those source jobs, because we think we have a little bit more of a pulse in terms of what's happening and what students are interested in, they oftentimes get applied to at a higher percentage than some of the others as well. So that human factor that we bring to the table, I think, helps in that as well. So alums, certainly we can track that on sites like LinkedIn, people like Brad and the alumni group at the university. We get a lot of referrals from that. We have a lot of deeks that are within some of these companies that want to be involved with recruiting. They let us know about different opportunities. So it is definitely an all hands on deck type of process to cultivate relationships and provide as many opportunities as possible so that the students can take full advantage of the network and all the resources that we have within that process. So it's always ongoing. It's just one of those things like you just do, like breathe. You don't even know that you're doing it, but it's just part of what we do.
Great. Two quick questions, and then we'll pass the baton to Heidi. So one quick question is, can you describe Handshake at a high level, but in particular, what do students need to do to use Handshake appropriately if you're like a first-year student?
So Handshake is the system that people are using to connect students and employers. So there are 18 million students on this, 500,000 companies, and about 1,500 schools that have it. And students need to go and create a profile, just like you would on other social media sites. You can upload a resume within it, fill out a couple of forms or a couple of notices like preferences of where you want to work or location or industry. And then you can set up search agents as well. So a search agent is basically a saved search. Let's say you want to work in pharmaceuticals in Raleigh, and you can set up a search for internships, and you can find all those opportunities. that would relate to that. And it feeds it to you on a weekly basis. So there's a lot of technology there that you can use to kind of help with it. We also send out newsletters according to a couple of different industry pathways that we've provided, so students can sign up for that. So it pushes information to them. A lot of that information is on Handshake, and then they can go and pull it down from that initial push of the email. So it's very, very important. Handshake is becoming the source. And I would think of this like it was in the old days of trying to create a website or to create your search engine optimization. Students really need to know how to use this, need to have the right information up there, because employers will find them through this, or the technology will help them find the opportunities that they want to connect to the employers. So it's very important.
Thanks, Stuart. I mean, that is why that is one of the most fundamental things that a student can have to make their process easier. If they're not on there, we don't know what they want. We can't talk to them. We can't track them. And they're not actually looking at job opportunities or internship opportunities. So that's actually would be a real issue if they're not using the system. That might be a good question for parents to ask their child when they're at home at Thanksgiving. Hey, if you gotten your profile together on Handshake, I hear it's really easy and really valuable and important to do. You might find something interesting to do this next summer. All right, last question I had. If a parent works at a company that might want to hire Wake Forest students, what should they do? Let me give you one sales pitch for a Wake Forest student and why recruit at Wake. One is our employer relations team. They do a lot of surveys with employers and they ask, how do you like working at Wake? Would you recommend it to someone else? That's called your Net Promoter Score. Anything over 50 is great. When you get into the 60 plus range, you're in the range of Ritz-Carlton, Zappos, JetBlue, some of the best service companies in the country. And we're typically at 67 to 74. So thank you, Stuart, for your team and all that you do to make it so great. So if you have a company that wants to recruit, they're gonna have a great experience recruiting at Wake. But also they say our students are hardworking. They say they have great interpersonal skills. They say that they are just great team players and really have a good sense of like, how do you be part of a team and do whatever that's required, and are actually really gracious people. Like that's why we love working at Wake. So if you actually are interested in students like that, you should be recruiting Wake Forest students. But Stuart, talk a little bit about what does a company need to do if they want to actually recruit students from Wake Forest?
Well, you can contact me directly. I can give you more details, or maybe your company is already recruiting and you may be part of a division that's not recruiting here. That's a common occurrence as well. We can get you plugged in with the people that we know at your organization, and you won't have to start from the beginning. If you're a new company altogether, you got to have your own account within Handshake. That's the best way to get going, and we have people on our staff that can help you with that as well. So it really depends on where you're coming into the game and how active you want to be. If you want to come on campus, there's events that we have that most schools have. If you just want to be a virtual recruiter and just post jobs, we can do that as well. So contact us. Again, my email is in the chat, and I'd be glad to help anyone.
Great. Thanks, Stuart. We'll bring you back a little bit later. Let's talk to Heidi now. Hi, Heidi.
Good evening. I'm so glad everyone is here. I'd just like to say hello to all of the parents and that we're glad you're here. And thank you for sending your children to Wake.
Great. Well, we appreciate you, Heidi, very much. For those of you who don't know, Heidi Robinson is our Assistant Vice President within the Office of Personal and Career Development. She oversees all of our career coaches who work with those students, which end up comprising total about 4,800 to 5,000 students in the college. And then on top of that, she has architected and leads all of our college to career courses, which we'll talk about in a second. But it is one of those courses that are very, very effective and really help our students. So Heidi, a few things I want to ask you before we have our guest student come on that you can talk with. But the first thing is that we talk a lot about this idea of being career ready or career and life ready. And we call that the Ready 7. And I know part of it is just that, we've always used this phrase that we're really interested in teaching students how to fish, not just give them a fish. We're not just trying to give them an internship, but not really learn how to get that internship on their own, same as get a job and learn how to get it on their own. Because what we know is that most people are going to have anywhere from 10 to as many 30 jobs in their lives. And so you have to get good at finding jobs, securing jobs, interviewing for jobs, making good, smart decisions. And so that's a big part of our process that the Ready 7 is about. Can you talk a little bit about that and why that's so important, even if you're going to be a pre-med or pre-law kind of student? It's not just for getting jobs too.
No, I appreciate that we're talking about career and life readiness. That is something that we believe in so strongly at Wake Forest. It's why we believe in early and intentional engagement with our office, but with this process as well. A lot of times, college students will come in and it's very developmentally appropriate. They'll come in and they'll say, I just want to make a resume. And that's a great start. But the facts are these: the most effective resumes are directed at a particular opportunity. We call that tailoring the resume. And it's hard to tailor a resume. It's hard to be certain about what it is that you want to pursue if you haven't done the first couple of steps. In other words, understanding your own interests and your values, the way your brain works and the kinds of work that raises your energy. And then again, being aware of your career opportunities and those things that call to you or where your interests may be. And so we want students to walk through those processes before they get to personal branding, which is that resume, their LinkedIn, and of course, thinking about their handshake profile. We want them to learn how to build professional relationships. We know that 70 to 90% of all opportunities are landed because of relationship. So we want students to get very comfortable with relationship building. And then we want them to be certain that they can network and then they can interview. Interviewing skills are key, and employers are telling us that they want students to be able to not only have an in-person interview, but also, as Stuart mentioned, have this virtual interview as well. This is not going away. And so being able to do both and be effective in that way it's critical for them. So Ready 7, I like parents to know that it's organic to Wake Forest. We built Ready 7 thinking about our students, knowing our students, and being committed to the kinds of opportunities that are important to them.
Great. Thanks, Heidi. A lot of people are wondering, what are the best ways for first-year students to start working with the OPCD, and when should they get started? Give a sense for like the timetable.
Oh, I want those students to come in right away. I think one of the best things, Stuart referenced handshake profile. We talked a little bit about that. I tell students a lot of times they think of handshake as a mall to go and shop for opportunities, and that's true. Opportunities are there and they should be looking, but it's also a two-way mirror because the other folks who are in there shopping are employers. And so what we really want is we want that handshake profile to be sharp. We want a picture. We want the student to describe a little bit about themselves. We want them to go ahead and call out their skills. And a lot of times, parents, your children are highly skilled and extraordinarily humble. So part of our job is to help them tease out those skills that they already have that are valuable in the workplace. And then when they upload that resume, we want it to be smart. So I would say get that handshake profile completed, including the conversation that begins with our office on their own career interests. We referenced not only the handshake opportunities that we're able to then push their direction once we know what calls to them, but we can also go ahead and help them set up searches. The search is like having a career assistant. And what happens is after they set up the search, they can change their notifications, and then all the kinds of opportunities that come into the feed and into the system go straight to your child. It's really an opportunity to go ahead and help your child make this process a little bit easier. And finally, Andy, I want every one of our first-year students to have a great resume. So one of the easiest and probably low pressure ways for your student to go ahead and get started in that process is twice a week. We have resume clinics, and there is a virtual opportunity for them to go ahead and pop in, or they can come in person. I like them to come in person because I want to know your child and help them and know how we can best help them. But I like the virtual one too, which they can do whether it's raining or they're off campus in some way. But I want them to have their first college resume. If you go on our website, you'll see that we've actually developed a template for your first-year student. And it's as easy as we can possibly make it, and built into the template are suggestions and ways they can think about shaping their own story.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Yeah, it sounds like there's ways that students can engage that could be either some group things, some drop-in things, we might actually be coming out to them, whether it be in their academic department or their affinity group. So there are many different things that are available. One of the things actually you might have referred to, but in case you didn't, just we do have some funds where if students don't have the financial ability to like travel to go someplace or want to take a maybe unpaid internship in order to take a certain kind of job, that is available. Can you talk a little bit about that funding you have?
Absolutely. They are really important funds to us, but they're also very Wake Forest. And so if a student does have a need for an unpaid internship, or they have a need for a professional development grant, in other words, perhaps it's a suit that's needed, or even some kind of, students have used them for plane tickets or things to be able to get to an interview if they need it. And those funds are distributed after students apply for them. And that application process is on our website.
Great. So another question is, we talk about high impact experiences that are different from internships. And can you talk a little bit about this idea that students don't always have to have formal internships in order to actually get value out of the summer?
Oh my goodness, Andy, I love that you asked this question. I've had this conversation earlier today with several students. So many times students get really locked into this myth that the only kind of professional experience is a formal internship. And what we want students to really understand is that we want them to have experiences that help them build skills. That can happen in a host of different ways. On campus, our professors are always looking for help with their research. And all a student would have to do is approach one of the professors that they've built a relationship with and ask about opportunities to do research. That's professional experience. There are two other websites that are sort of project-based, and Stuart referenced one, Parker Dewey. That is many startups, and they're always looking for people who can help them with projects. Some are 1 hour, perhaps doing an overview of their website. Some are a little bit more engaged and skill-based. So it's a wonderful opportunity for students to go ahead and add to their resume from wherever they are, including during the semester. Also, I've been asking students what they're going to do over winter break. They can be doing several different things while they are home to add to that first year resume. They can be getting professional experience in nonprofits, and perhaps they do want to do direct service. But what they might ask any nonprofit that they've been engaged with is, are there some professional projects where I could use some of the skills that I've gained while I'm at Wake Forest? Perhaps there's a social media account that needs some help or some support. Perhaps there's a project on Excel where they're helping with inventory. All of these different things are small, but they become mighty because career momentum actually is very much like a snowball. You just have to kind of keep getting small experiences, and eventually that's what leads to the big internship. So for your first year student, don't be surprised if they've met with us or been in our office and they come home and say, hey, I'm trying to find a 2-day project, a 3-day project. Do you think you could help me speak to someone in our hometown where I might be able to do something? We call that an externship. And by George, we put that on the resume because it is professional skill building.
Terrific. I have a couple of quick questions, and then I'll let you take over and have a conversation with Jack. So first question is your college to career courses. Can you talk about them and why they're so important, and then also how students can get into those courses and when they should?
Oh, and when they should. Thank you. So I would say that part of the early and intentional, it's really our philosophy. And the college to career courses are one of the ways that we engage students early in their Wake Forest experience. And it's one of the ways that we get them through our door. Our college to career courses are really set up around 4 questions that every human being has to answer. Who am I? What's out there for me? How do I secure the opportunity that I want? And once I'm there, how do I thrive? So we've set up courses that help our students begin to answer that question early on. They all fall within the Department of Education. So when your student looks for them, it will say EDU will be the prefix. And it's EDU 120, 220, 320, 360. And then there's another in case students need to catch up called 299. All of these are half semester courses and 1.5 credits, which means that your student could actually take 2 during a given semester, or one, depending on their course load. Ideally, in my ideal world, I would have all students take 120 and 220, the first two, before the end of their sophomore year. And that's because in the sophomore year, a lot of students become very anxious about major selection. In 120, we really focus on this idea of the role of major in career selection and some of the mythology that, for example, all biology majors have to be pre-med. They may actually go to Deloitte, like our junior was, who was in talking about his internship offer. So we want to go ahead and help your students relax as they think about their major selection, and to make their major selection wisely. And then in 220 is options in the world of work. And the average high school student can only name 10 careers. We just know that it's much more nuanced than that, and that we want students to be exploring and finding the different kinds of options, because options create hope in the human spirit.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. My last question for you then is this, a lot of students want to get into the business world. In general, what they believe is in order to do that, you have to get into the business school. I'd like you to talk a little bit about whether that's true or not. And then also, let's say you did want to go to the business school, what are some things that you might, as a first year student, be thinking, okay, how do I maximize my chances of being able to get into the business school?
I could give anecdote after anecdote about our students who are thriving in the world of business in a host of different areas, including finance, which I think is one of the places where students get hung up, that they have to be in finance in order to go that route. And what I would say is our students do well because they are simply not to be outworked. They have critical thinking skills. They are remarkable at building interpersonal relationships. And they are amazing at picking up all sorts of skills, really beyond what their coursework is. So what I really encourage students to do, and parents, is to go ahead and go on our website. And I think we referenced it earlier, but it's Where Do Deeks Go? And you can look by major. And what I would encourage you to do is to go ahead and compare, for example, econ, which is in the college, to BEM, which is in the School of Business. And you'll see that many of those outcomes are actually remarkably similar. And it would be hard, if you covered up which major it was, to determine which major you were looking at. And I say that for parents, but also for students, so that students can go ahead and make choices, not out of fear, but out of a position of information. If a student wants to go into the School of Business, one of the most important things that they can do is go ahead and begin engaging with our office early. They really do need to be working on their resume, making sure they've got all of their personal branding documents ready, and then going ahead and making sure that the prerequisite courses are being met. One of the other pieces I would add is keeping an eye on their GPA. That is also another piece of getting into the business school.
That's good. And keeping an eye means keeping it high. So one of the things that I was thinking about that I'll wrap up with just a thought about this, is that, a lot of times students, when they come to Wake Forest, they are telling parents or others, like, I really want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer. And so, the listener's mind, it's like, oh, the students made up their mind and they know what they want to do. And then somewhere along the way, they change their mind. And what I try to tell a lot of people is, I think anywhere from, depending on the year, 30 to 40% of students who are pretty good STEM majors think they're going to be a doctor. And then they hit something like either organic chemistry, or they actually go to the hospital and work in it and realize, I guess maybe not doctor, like they start to realize maybe that's not it. And so that is totally fine, because there's so many other places where a student can actually be involved in the world of healthcare if that's what they want. And we can help them with that question. And so I just wanted to mention and think it's important for you as parents out there, know that there's a very good chance, as your child keeps learning new things about what it's like to be in college and what you can study and what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you're not good at, that there's high likelihood that it'll change. And so as it changes, know that we are here and available to help your child, no matter what it changes from what to what. I do think that's something that I find I get sad sometimes when students will say, oh, I changed my mind from what I did last year, so I guess I don't need to go to the OPCD. It's like, no, that's why you should go now, because now it's changed. It's an opportunity for you to like reset your path and make sure you're utilizing all the resources we have. So I know we do that and work with students in a lot of ways like that, but I do think it's important for parents to know, if your child changes their mind, it's actually not the end, it's the beginning of something new. And it's something that we have resources and people here who really want to help your child in that moment.
And Andy, I would just add to that it's all right for students to be exploring. That is developmentally appropriate. And I think you alluded to this earlier, and it's something that we just believe in wholeheartedly, which is students need to be able to be okay that they are still in this opportunity stage where things are fluid and they're adding to the information that they have about things that interest them and who they are. And so often there's this comparison trap that students feel like everyone else knows and that they don't. So to the degree that parents can understand that often that's where students sit, I think that's really helpful to the student.
That's really good. Yes, there is a lot of thinking that everyone else has got it figured out and you don't, when in fact, most people don't have it that figured out, and it keeps changing. And it takes time. And like I said, our team wants to help your student in that process when it can feel sometimes very anxious or uncertain. Well, I'm going to let you take the lead here and take some time to talk to Jack, and we'll come back with everyone in the last 5 or 10 minutes. Okay.
Thanks, Andy.
All right. Thanks, Heidi.
I am very excited to introduce you parents to one of your students' peers, Jack Church. And Jack, I'll let you introduce yourself and where you're from.
Hey everybody, my name is Jack Church and I'm a freshman from New York City.
So Jack, one of the reasons we really wanted parents to hear from you is because you have done such a good job of having early and intentional engagement in your own career. I wonder if you could go ahead, and some people may be saying engagement in his career, he has only been there since August, but really you've done a lot. And I wonder if you could sort of speak to the ways that you have been moving things forward for yourself.
Yeah, totally. So I guess I just showed up and I didn't know anything about the OPCD or the EDU classes that you just talked about, but I signed up for one and had no idea how beneficial it was going to be. Like right away, I was with Professor Ralston and she got us working on our resumes, our LinkedIn accounts, our Handshake accounts, literally within the first weeks of even stepping on campus. And it kind of felt a little weird because all those things seem like so professional and they seem so far away. And then all of a sudden I was sitting there doing them. But thanks to the class, we were able to get a lot of feedback on them, a lot of helpful criticism, just to sort of keep them becoming better and better one day at a time. Because we're always told like they're living documents, so you always want to be changing them and updating them. So that class really helped us sort of create them. And now I enjoyed the first class so much that I immediately signed up for the second class. Now I have Professor Robinson, and now I'm just continuing to build on those documents for later on in the near future.
Jack, I think you're being very modest, and I love hearing you tell the story. I will add that in your own free time, that resume of yours looks great because you've come into all sorts of different kinds of opportunities to improve it. Will you speak a little bit to how you have improved it even beyond the class?
Yeah, so one of the nice things about the class is they've really taught us about all the opportunities through the OPCD. So there's like open office hours where you can literally just stop by and no appointment needed, and just get someone to review your resume. It takes 15 minutes just to get an extra set of eyes on it. Or you can schedule like a one-on-one appointment with another career coach, which I've done just to, like I just said, get some more advice, some more help with it. And yeah, one of the things that's really come clear is that all the career coaches are just here to help us. And that's their main goal, is to just make sure that we feel comfortable. So it's been a great experience so far.
Jack, one of the things that students often feel a little worried about is this idea of building professional relationships and reaching out to people they may or may not know and having conversations about careers. Because you have taken both of these courses, you've actually gained a lot of skills. Will you say kind of what that was like when we told you, hey, you're going to talk to people you don't know about career stuff, and then kind of how that's progressed?
Yeah, 100%. So one of the assignments in the class is called an informational interview. So in the first class, the EDU 120 class, I was able to speak to, well, the option was there to speak with people you already knew about their job. And that's what I picked because it felt a little more comfortable.
Yes.
So I spoke with relatives or family friends about their jobs. But now in the second class, which I'm taking right now, we're required to talk to adults who we have no affiliation with whatsoever. So we have to go on the Wake Forest LinkedIn account and just scroll and look for alumni that have professions that somewhat pique our interest. And then we message them on LinkedIn with like a short introduction, a little bit about ourselves, and then just asking for 15 minutes of their time. And I just had one of the calls this past week. It was my first one, a little nerve wracking, but it went really well. And it's just nice to, one, you get to learn a lot about a job that you may or may not be interested in. And two, you get to start networking, which is going to turn out to be really helpful later on. So you get to have these contacts and start like a little relationship with them that you can, if you want to, you can refer back to it later down the road.
I love it. And in fact, you were the person who in class today, just to sort of highlight one of the things that I thought was a wonderful strategy, you said, hey, I'd like to go ahead and track these people that I'm meeting and that I'm talking with, which I thought was actually a very mature career strategy. And will you speak a little bit about how you did that and what you did? Because I thought that was a great thing to be starting as a first year.
Yeah, so it was actually during the phone call that I had, one of the questions was just if he had any advice for a first year student who was somewhat interested in his career path. And well, there's two main things he said. First was talk to every single Wake Forest alum in the firm that you're interested in, because our alumni network is so tight and they're always willing to help out other Wake Forest students. So that was the first thing he said. And then the second thing he said was to start like an Excel sheet or a spreadsheet and just keep track of all your contacts, you know, when you spoke to them, what you spoke about, and their contact information. And I found this pretty interesting. Well, he said that he always reached out on a Tuesday because that's when he got the most responses. So I've started to do that now. And then he also said that every 2 weeks he would circle back on the list. And if anybody who he'd reached out to hadn't responded, after 2 weeks, he would email them again. So he said you really have to be dedicated and sort of persistent if you want to get those responses, because they're getting thousands of emails a week.
So I love that it's not even Thanksgiving and you already have this very strategic mindset. And in class today, you downloaded and started your own Excel spreadsheet. And I just want to tip my hat to you about that, that as soon as you got that information and that advice, you acted on it. I think the last thing that I would ask you about is, because you've been in class now since August and hearing lots of different people, hearing from young professionals, I think to myself, one thing that parents often ask is it really necessary for my child to start looking for professional experiences? And for perhaps over winter break or even during the summer after one's first year, I guess I'm curious, given where you have been sitting in class, what you would say.
Yeah, I'd say that I'm lucky. I've considered myself lucky that I came in touch with you guys so early, especially since I didn't really know what the OPCD was beforehand. So I'd say if anybody was debating whether or not to sign up for one of these EDU classes, that it's so beneficial. And there's freshmen through seniors in the class, so it doesn't really target any specific age group. There's all 4 years of us in that class. So and the cool thing is we all have a little bit of a different goal with the class. Like the seniors in the class are really focusing on their job search, whereas as a freshman, I'm just trying to learn as much as possible and sort of get a foundation. So the class kind of serves different purposes, but it's extremely helpful. And I'm looking forward to taking the next two as well.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait to get you back in class. Do you think tell me about internships. Do you think it's necessary, now that you've been listening in class, for first years to begin looking for that internship and to be looking for that kind of professional experience? I guess I'd be wondering how your thinking has changed.
Yeah, no, I think, and I'll circle back to that call I had with the Wake Forest alum, but first he was surprised I was a freshman because he said, oh, that's very early. You don't really need to be doing this right now. But he said it's only going to help. So I think that sort of goes to show that, yeah, like I'm not really sure what I'm going to do this summer, but I think whether I end up doing something professional or not, the fact that I'm just able to learn through the OPCD is so far I've found it extremely helpful.
I love it. And what you're continuing to do is build those skills. And to your point, we're still a ways out from summer, but the idea that right now you're learning more, you're thinking about the kinds of experiences that you'd like to have. And even if you had some of them on campus, I think a lot of times students and parents may not know that there are professional experiences that students can be having while they are on campus, and that those are valuable too. Jack, we are so grateful. If you were going to give any parents of first year some advice, is there anything that you would want to leave them with?
I mean, I think I would just definitely say again to just whether it's taking this course or just stopping by to say hello, and maybe signing up for one of those first resume building sessions. That's sort of like the start, and it's definitely intimidating, but it's definitely worthwhile, and it sort of sets you on this nice trajectory. So yeah, I definitely try and take the class if possible. I've loved every second of it. There's homework, but it never really feels like homework. It feels like real life stuff that you need to get done. So you feel really productive.
Well, I love that you don't feel like it's homework, because I do feel like there is work at it, but maybe it's just because it's becoming easier and easier for you because you've got all this momentum going. Jack, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you for inspiring parents. I think this helps parents have these conversations with their students that it's not as scary maybe as they thought it was or would be.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Glad you were with us. All right. There is really no wisdom that is better than hearing from our students, Andy.
I agree. Thank you, Jack, for joining us. What an impressive start you have by being at Wake Forest. It's really glad you're with us, and glad to again help all the first year students out there. Stuart, why don't you join us for one last question? I think the question is basically the one that Heidi's asking. And so if Stuart comes back, we'll ask him, but if not, I'll start with you, Heidi. Tell me, what do you think is actually like one thing that's a good word of advice for first year parents right now to help them help their child, and also, sort of be their best selves in the process? What can parents really do?
I always come at this from the sitting with students a lot, and our students are wired to achieve. And so it may not seem as if students are thinking about these kinds of things. And so then sometimes parents feel like they have to kind of push that conversation. And what I would say is our students are thinking about this, and they're starting to go ahead and ask themselves questions. And so to the degree that parents can come alongside and ask what kinds of things might be helpful to talk about, or what kinds of help. Andy, you're a big proponent of this, that asking parents ask children what it is they'd like help with. And I've heard you say that a number of times, and that really comes to mind at this time of year when students are stressed.
That's great. Thank you, Heidi. How about you, Stuart? Any word of advice for parents of first year students?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is to evaluate the market. I think one of the parents was asking about the top employers or the top salaries by major and industry and so forth. I think that information is very good because it kind of sets the expectations and gives a realistic preview of what's been done in the past. Not that we want to squash anyone's dreams, but I think we also want to give them the benefit of some historical data of students that have gone before in these particular programs, which I think could be kind of helpful. And there's definitely different paths are going to be either clear or a little bit murkier, depending on which major you select and what field that goes into. It's not saying that you can't do X if you're majoring in Y, but certain things will make it a lot easier if that's what your goal is. So I think those are some of the things that I would suggest. Jack's very impressive. I mean, the fact that anyone has done that already in the first couple of months, I think he will be more than fine. So maybe we need to ask Jack what his advice is for his colleagues.
Jack, do you have any?
Jack,
do you want to put in a final word? Advice?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say, I'd sort of circle back to what I said earlier, that just sort of, one, reaching out to the OPCD, knowing that they're there to help you, and sort of just, I don't know, I guess beginning to think about it, I guess you could say, even though it seems like a long way down the road, the earlier you start to think about it, which is sort of what I'm trying to do right now. I guess the more prepared you're going to be when it sort of really matters.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'd probably, for my final thought is I would say that, know that at Wake Forest, since our team has been together, I think since like 2013, the average percent of students having jobs at graduation is like 96.5% or something like that. And so within 6 months of graduation, everyone pretty much gets a job or goes to a great grad school. And so the idea that if my student doesn't do something now, like it's like their life is going to be over, they're not going to get a job and they're going to waste their Wake Forest education, that's not going to happen. There's just like no way that happens. And so the main thing is then, okay, in that bigger picture, every student has a certain time where their light really comes on. And with Jack, it's coming on now. But just because it happened for him, it doesn't mean that if your child's not there, that there's something the matter with your child, because it happens really quickly. I mean, it can happen like one day your child can say, I'm like so lost and confused, and they meet with someone, all of a sudden, like, I know what I want to do now. And so it's hold things very lightly and really encourage your child to explore and keep being curious and ask questions and find people to help them. And I mean, that's one of the big reasons why I keep reminding, why'd you come to Wake Forest? Because I want to be in a community where there are a lot of people who are really nice, who want to actually help me. And so it's like, well, if that's the case, then go ask those people for some help, because they want to help you. And that is definitely the thing that, someone asked in the Q&A, like, what are the big hurdles? And there are definitely hurdles there's some things that are fundamental on do you have your story and your materials together? But the bigger hurdles, like for most, are that students have made up their minds as to the way they think how the world works. And usually it's not very accurate. And so what happens is if you don't help them try to find a way to investigate, how is the world really working? Back to the point Stuart's making about the market, they start making decisions on very limited information. Oftentimes, maybe, a bunch of 19-year-olds talking to each other saying, this is how this all works. So this is what we should do. And it's like, that's not how it works. So we should actually spend some time together. So just encourage them to use all the resources we have at Wake Forest. Heidi, I know you wanted one final comment.
I do so much. And that is that your child does not have to have it figured out to come to our office. In fact, that's what we want to be with them. We want to be with them in that process. So have them come to open office hours on Thursday. It's so casual, and it's from 3:45 to 5:30. They can just drop in and they can bring a friend, but they don't have to have a full plan to come in and meet with us. We want to help them build that plan.
Yeah. And we have free coffee and some snacks. So
Sometimes a dog.
Yeah, exactly. We have a lot of fun things. All righty. Thank you all. Thank you, Jack. And parents, thank you for taking the time to be with us. We look forward to helping your child, and we're there. We're here for them. So we're excited to get to know them better. Brad, back to you.
Andy, thanks so much. And Stuart and Heidi, thank you for your involvement and input tonight. And Jack, especially thank you. I think for a lot of parents, it's a matter of understanding the touch. First year in college, first semester is always such a roller coaster ride of new experiences that getting through this time frame of transition, even leading into final exams for the first time, is always a very emotional time. And I think if you can kind of encourage your students to take advantage of everything it's there at Wake Forest, I think the overriding factor you heard tonight is that OPCD wants to help, wants to engage with your student. You'd find that at any department across campus. And as this first year kind of evolves, encouraging your students to take advantage, if they can, of everything that's here. But thank everybody. Thank everyone for being here tonight. I want to thank our panel and everybody for being part of this. As you saw in the invitation, this is being recorded and it'll be posted in a week's time on the OPCD website with some other insights and things about what's happened in our other programs and other Zoom meetings. But thank everybody tonight. If we can do anything to help on our end, please let us know. Take care. Go Deeks.
Go Deeks. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Patrick. Thanks, Jack.